I got it. Thank you, Mr. Hanson, for saving the day.
Actually, it was Pastor John with a note that I decided that I would pass along quickly. So
Thank you, Pastor, for saving the day. Okay.
And Ola, can you stop sharing so I can load the slides?
Uh-huh. Yes. Technology. Okay. So we will begin with our presentation. So first up, we have Arlene Price. Arlene Price is a clinical pharmacist with over 25 years of pharmacy experience in retail, hospital, long-term care consulting, academia, managed care, and the pharmaceutical industry. She joined Janssen in 2005 and is currently a scientific director for national accounts. Arlene also serves as the, oh no, I'm so sorry. Arlene also serves as the therapeutic lead for value and evidence on the Janssen COVID-19 vaccine launch work group, providing education and training on vaccines and the development program for Janssen's COVID-19 vaccine. Arlene is a member of Our Savior Lutheran Church in Stanhope. Arlene will present on Virology 101. Thank you.
Thanks, Ola. All right. So Virology 101 or Vaccines 101, we wanted to kick off with just some basics so that we have everybody on the same page and understanding some of the terms we're going to be using. And with vaccines, these are probably the most cost-effective healthcare delivery options that we have today. The CDC estimates that with vaccinations, we are preventing millions of illnesses, avoiding millions of deaths, and then also in terms of the savings to our economy. So what I wanted to do is just start with a brief introduction to what is a vaccine. And really, vaccines are used to kind of prime the pump or get your immune system working to fight against some type of virus or bacteria that you might be exposed to. And in the case of the vaccines that we have today, many of them are either made from whole pathogens, parts of pathogens, but the goal here is to introduce some type of an antigen. And in the case of COVID-19, it is the spike protein that is on the outside of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And that is how the virus attaches to our cells. So if you are exposed to COVID-19 or to the virus, it'll come into your, like either through the eyes, the nose, or the mouth. It's mucous membranes, how the virus can enter our body. And it uses the spike protein to attach to our cells, enter those cells, and then start replicating. And the virus has to find a living host within 24 to 48 hours or it will die. So that's why, it can only be transmitted from living host to living host. But by using that spike protein, that is what all of the vaccines to date have been going after, the spike protein, and using that as the antigen that the body will mount a defense to. So here's, again, using the spike protein, incorporating that into a vaccine, and how we go about priming the pump, or I guess you could call it boot camp for our immune system. So when you get a vaccine, that kicks in your body's own immune defenses, where we mobilize our B cells, which produce antibodies. And that's how we can attack the virus before it infects our cells, and it'll neutralize that virus. The other cellular response is T cells. So T cells and T helper cells, that if the virus actually does enter your cell, that's how our body fights off that virus so that it'll stop replicating and die off. So those are the two types of defense systems that we have. That a vaccine primes the pump and gets your body's immune system working against a specific antigen. So there's been a lot of advancements in vaccine research and development. Going back to the old days, I think we were talking about this in our pre-call that, back in the day when the flu vaccines were made in eggs and you had to be careful in people that had egg allergies. Well, those are no more because everything now today is recombinant DNA technology. So you were able to streamline the whole process of making the vaccines. So the conventional vaccines that are out there go back to the days of smallpox, with the Revolutionary War, where they were actually taking the serum or like the pus from smallpox and vaccinating the troops with that. So we've come a long way since those days, but they still will use live attenuated vaccines in some situations. And examples of that would be like with the measles or with polio. Inactive vaccines include the flu or also some of the polio vaccines. And then under subunit vaccines, that's also what some of the flu shots would come in under the recombinant protein vaccines. And then like the toxoid subunits would be like diphtheria and tetanus. And then other types of vaccines that you traditionally see. And so we're going to shift now over to the right-hand side under the novel vaccine mechanisms. And the ones that are being produced for COVID-19, the two that are already in the market under emergency use authorizations are both RNA vaccines. And then shortly, you'll be seeing two more from Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca, and those will both be non-replicating viral vector vaccines. So I'll just show you quickly how those different vaccines, even though they're using different platforms, the goal is to deliver the antigen into the body so that your cells can see it and start making copies of it and creating a memory so that if they ever see it again, so if you get exposed to COVID after you've been vaccinated, your body will remember, aha, we know how to fight this and we can mount a defense to stop it from invading the body. So this is with the viral vectored vaccines. They make copies and circulate and prime the body, or really prime the immune system to fight off anything that they will see in the future. And then with the RNA vaccines, which are the nucleic acid vaccines, one example with Moderna and Pfizer's, they also are making copies and entering the cells and then priming the immune system to fight off that specific antigen. So that is the process or what's going on behind the scenes. And traditionally in vaccine development, it has been a very lengthy process because you're doing everything in sequence. You're doing your preclinical studies, you're doing your phase 1, your phase 2, your phase 3 studies, and you're waiting for the results to come in for each of those before you move on to the next one. And then only after all of that, when you have ramped up and done your big phase 3 studies in large populations, that's when you really start scaling up your manufacturing. Well, under a pandemic, it's a whole new ball game. And the reason, it has been a speedier process, none of the steps were skipped, but they were all done in parallel. So instead of waiting for the results of each one to come in, these were all being done, in parallel, and even the manufacturing was being done at risk. So that's why the government invested those large amounts of money to, help pharmaceutical companies go at risk in manufacturing and scaling up for large productions of these vaccines before we even knew the final results. So that's why we were able to compress a 10 to 15-year process into 1 year, which is a miracle in and of itself. So just briefly then, when we're looking at the effectiveness of vaccines, there's a lot of things that affect how well we respond to a vaccine. And a lot of it is dependent upon our own immune system. And when we age, with each decade of life, your immune system decreases in its response time. So that's why in the elderly population, they are at greater risk, especially for COVID-19. And that's also where we see the highest death rate in the elderly population. So that's also why we started with, in terms of how you prioritize the vaccinations, the frontline workers, healthcare responders were prioritized, but right now, a lot of the waves that states are in would include the elderly population, those in nursing homes, and also those that are 65 and older. Then also your previous immune history. If you've already had COVID, your body will make antibodies to COVID-19. And studies are showing that those will usually last between 4 and 6 months. So if you've had COVID, your doctor would be able to assess, like say 6 months after your symptoms have resolved, you probably would be a candidate at that point for a vaccine to keep your antibody titers at that protective level. And then there's other things that will come into effect in how well a vaccine works in your body. Other chronic diseases can impact how well you respond to a vaccine. So like if you already have a suppressed immune system, either from cancer or say rheumatoid arthritis, some of the autoimmune diseases, your immune system is working hard to fight some of those chronic diseases, and there's not as much available to mount a defense to a virus that shows up. And then also other comorbidities, diabetes, obesity, also pregnancy. Again, your immune system, it's working for two, and you also have a difference in the volume of distribution in your body. And so that could lessen the effect of a vaccine potentially. And so those all come into play. And then also what we're finding now is the other factor is the virus itself can mutate. And that's why we have right now, there's 4 variants that are circulating, South Africa, the UK, Brazil, and the California variant. And so we are testing the vaccines to make sure that they will continue to work even in light of these variants. So what you're hearing about now is the distribution of the vaccines under an emergency use authorization. That is all controlled by the federal government. The DoD has purchased the vaccines that are coming out of these manufacturers that are participating, what was previously called Operation Warp Speed. They're now just calling it the COVID-19 response team. And those vaccines, as an example with J&J, we've contracted with the DoD to supply 100 million doses by the end of June. And then at that point, the DoD works with the CDC to determine where those vaccines get allocated. They go to the state health departments, who then determine, okay, we're going to send so much to this vaccination center, so much to these pharmacies, so much to the nursing homes. So that's the process, and why you see variability, because the states are determining once they get their allotment where it's going to go within their state. But that's just the process that's in place right now. And unfortunately, it's a supply and demand issue. We have more demand than supply right now. So all of the companies that are getting their emergency use authorizations are ramping up. And once we have more in the market, that's when you'll have greater availability, and also the different waves can open up to include more patients, over 65, but also under 65, and where they'll open it up to everybody at some point when we have enough supply in the marketplace. So what's going on right now? The 6 companies that participated in Operation Warp Speed, you already have, as I mentioned, Pfizer and Moderna have their RNA vaccines in the marketplace now under an emergency use authorization. And then J&J and AstraZeneca will be coming shortly, probably in the March and April timeframes. And there's several others that also will have vaccines coming. But during a pandemic, the goal is to get as many people vaccinated as possible. So you want as many shots on goal as you can get. And so the more vaccines we have, the more people we can get vaccinated. That will stop the virus from replicating and also from mutating and not have any other places for it to go. And so the goal is to get to herd immunity and have at least 70 to 80% of the population vaccinated in order to achieve that. So with that, I will turn it back over to Ola.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry. Oh gosh. Thank you, Arlene. Oh gosh. Next, we'll hear from the nurse's perspective, starting with Heather Christian, a registered nurse.
I always forget to unmute myself and then you start talking. Thank you, Ola, for having us, and Arlene, fabulous. I'm so glad that we have the actual scientists and researchers in this panel, and I am in no way an expert. So I am just a new nurse. And so when Ola asked me to be a part of this, I kind of thought I was at first just being an audience member. So anyway, what little I know about vaccine, I was educated on how vaccines and drugs come to market. So this was informative because I shared with her just a conversation I had with my sister. So my sister and I were having a conversation about the vaccine, and she expressed her concern and hesitancy to getting the vaccine. She mentioned that she is skeptical about the short amount of time that it took to get the vaccine, and that she is not sure if she trusts the data. So I expressed to her that she is not alone in feeling this way, and that many others, including healthcare workers, are also hesitant to get vaccinated for that reason, and that it is absolutely your right to refuse the vaccine. However, I asked her if she would like a little bit of information that I have on how vaccines are created. And given the unusual circumstance that we have the pandemic, COVID-19 vaccine was fast-tracked through the process, not by compromising the clinical trials that actually study the effects and the results of the vaccine, but by eliminating the red tape that is involved in the process. So I have just 5 slides, and I'll just briefly show you the process. So I share a screen with you, right? Okay. So how did we get this vaccine for COVID-19 so quickly, and can we trust it? In the past, it has taken years and years to develop vaccines, but with COVID-19 vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine was developed in record time. New research and technological advances allowed COVID-19 vaccines to be created faster than ever before. How did scientists and researchers do this? First, they would determine the genetic sequence of the virus. So thanks to scientific improvements, researchers quickly cracked COVID-19's genetic code. Plus, COVID-19 has similarities to MERS and SARS, which are 2 other coronaviruses we've seen in humans. So since we already had research from these 2 viruses, scientists were able to use it to quicken the process. And parts of the genetic sequence of the virus is used as a vaccine so that your body will recognize it and build up antibodies. This is the method Pfizer and Moderna used to create their FDA-approved vaccine. And thankfully, Arlene explained the whole scientific process for us. So then after that part of the vaccine, or the process, then we do the 3 phases of clinical trials. And I think this is where it becomes interesting. So after scientists identified the virus and its genetic code, they developed a vaccine to study in 3 phases of clinical trials. While the technology to develop these COVID-19 vaccines was fast, the clinical trials were not rushed. These 3 phases of clinical trials were done carefully and properly regarding safety and efficacy. So there are 3 phases, and this is where the vaccine was already is being tested on humans. So the first group is with healthy volunteers. And then after that phase that they've determined the vaccine is safe, they go to phase 2, where they have hundreds of volunteers that are healthy and not healthy, meaning they may have comorbidities, as Arlene mentioned, with diabetes or hypertension. And then again, they check the safety and side effects and efficacy of the vaccine. Then they go to phase 3, and that's where they have thousands of volunteers that are usually participating in a double-blind study. And this is fascinating because double-blind means that some of the volunteers are given the vaccine and some are not, but they don't know if they're given it or who has the vaccine and who has the say placebo. Also, the researchers themselves are not aware of who is given the vaccine or not. So that way, there are no biases to what some of the side effects and symptoms could be. So that's after thousands of people. And again, they will examine the side effects and the effectiveness of the vaccine. So the interesting part is, along with scientific advancements, another reason why COVID-19 vaccines were created and approved so quickly is because the red tape was removed. Factors that usually hold up vaccine production and approval include, and there's 5 of them, and recruiting scientists. It can often take time to recruit enough scientists to work on vaccines, yet scientists were recruited from all around the world to aid COVID-19 vaccine research and development. Also, funding. Making a vaccine is extremely expensive. So usually it can take years to raise the funds needed to develop a vaccine. But funding for COVID-19 came pouring in from the US agencies at the Department of Health and Human Services, along with private donations. And this has been the case throughout the world. So the whole world is working on this vaccine. Also, volunteers. Usually getting enough volunteers to participate in clinical trials is a huge hurdle. But given COVID-19's notoriety, it didn't take long for thousands of people to sign up to volunteer. Many were excited about the prospect of being vaccinated against the virus. Then there is the time lapse that's in between each clinical trial, where there's funding, volunteers, and approvals are factors that can prevent a vaccine from moving swiftly through each phase of the clinical trial. With these barriers removed, phases were able to be completed without time wasted in between. And finally, FDA approval. So it can sometimes take years for the FDA to approve a new medicine or vaccine, but in a state of emergency, the FDA can grant an emergency use authorization. So those are some of the ways that the vaccine has become quicker. It's not that it was fast-tracked without, safety and efficacy. So the last slide here, this talks about the 3 phases of the clinical trial were not compromised. So scientists cannot speed up symptoms or side effects. What was sped up was the time gap that's in between each phase to review the data and to raise funds for the research and to recruit volunteers. They have to do this in between each phase. So that just happens seamlessly. Usually it's years in between. So because this vaccine was given emergency use authorization, it was put to the front of the line, so to speak, and it did not have to wait for other drugs or vaccines to be reviewed. So vaccines are only approved if they are safe and effective and that the benefit outweighs the risk. Sorry, let me just get to a few little notes. We know that COVID-19 can kill you, but it can also produce no symptoms. We still don't have the data to know why some people are more severely affected by the virus and others are not. But we do know that no one has died from the vaccine or even had serious side effects. There has been over 35 million people just in the US alone vaccinated, with no reports that I know of with severe effects. In contrast, we do know the devastating effects that COVID-19 has. So that's where you outweigh your benefits and your risks. Also, if there were to be side effects, they would usually show up within the first 48 hours of the vaccine. Also, when you're given the vaccine, they want you to wait at least 15 to 30 minutes while they, see if you have any serious side effects. Rarely are there long-term side effects with the vaccines. All this vaccine does is help your immune response recognize and attack the virus when detected in your body. Therefore, if you do become exposed or affected by the virus, your immune response will attack and kill the virus before it can cause any serious harm to you. So okay, now I'll quit sharing my screen. So there you go. There's what I know about the process.
Thank you very much, Heather. Your faces are. So now we will hear another nurse's perspective, Colleen Becker, who currently serves as the New Jersey District Parish Nurse, as well as a parish nurse in her home congregation, Our Savior Lutheran Church in Fairlawn. Colleen has been a registered nurse for 16 years, and before nursing, she worked as a social worker with families for the New Jersey Division of Youth and Family Services, as well as a mental health counselor. Colleen also works as a substitute school nurse for the Ringwood Board of Education and cares for special needs adults on the weekends with Spectrum for Living. Now I turn it over to Colleen.
Thank you, Ola. Thank you for having this wonderful presentation this morning. This is so vital. I think today I am just sharing my unique perspective as a registered nurse. When the pandemic first hit early in March and then April and May, I had the firsthand experience to work with full-blown COVID patients. I work in a very small long-term care facility on the weekends with very medically fragile adults. Many of my patients suffer from seizure disorders and many comorbidities. And in the very beginning, 100% of our patients developed COVID, unfortunately. And about 80% of our staff developed COVID. So we do know how infectious this virus is. And I myself, it was just a very difficult time during those early months, isolating from my family for almost 3 months was very hard. And throughout all of that, I still think that when I heard about the vaccine being developed, I actually had some hesitancy. So I want to share a little bit about that and just my own personal experience on this panel. I have recently received both doses of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. I received my first dose of the COVID vaccine on December 30th. And again, I was very hesitant, but when I was offered the vaccine, I thought this was the beginning of the end of that, a little bit of that isolation from my family. And so I got the first dose. I got it in Hallworth. at a small pharmacy. And like Heather has mentioned, you do not leave right after your dose. They would make you stay for 15 to 30 minutes to just assess you, make sure you're having no reaction. And they instruct you about the side effects. Now, the first dose, I just had some very mild muscular arm discomfort for about 24 to 48 hours following that first dose. I had no other side effects. I received my second dose on January 27th. And following that dose, the pharmacist did say to me, you know, tonight you'll probably have some chills, have a low-grade fever. So sure enough, that evening I did develop chills throughout the whole night. I was up with chills and I had a temp of about 99.5. I never needed anything, you know, to bring that fever down. I just kind of put some extra blankets on. And I had some lethargy for about 2 days following that second dose. All in all, with my experiences with different vaccines, I found it very, very good. I had probably less symptoms than I did with the flu shots. So I highly recommend it. We know that the vaccine can help minimize, even if you do end up contracting COVID-19, we know that if you are fully vaccinated, you are more likely to have much less severe symptoms. So that is just a blessing. I'm coming from a nursing perspective. I have many friends that work in acute care. They have not had a day off in weeks and months. So from the nursing perspective, I think it's so important to get this vaccine, because those of us that are on the front lines, it just helps that we can care for those patients if we all try to get this vaccine. So thank you again, Ola, for having me. I really, really hope that you will reach out if you have any questions regarding vaccine hesitancy. And I hope that my story has helped you to overcome any hesitation. And I pray that you will successfully get this vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you very much, Colleen. Now we will hear from a pharmaceutical scientist perspective. So from Brad Hansen. So I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ola. This has been, excellent. I think a lot of the hard work has been done by the others that have gone before me. I can give you a little bit of my background. I got my PhD in pharmaceutical chemistry back at the University of Kansas, and I've been working in the pharmaceutical industry for 17 years now. So what I've been doing is I've been looking at like late stage product development. So when you were seeing those slides about the different phases, I come in and try to ramp up and actually increase the manufacturing of dosage forms for like tablets, capsules, small molecule type compounds for different products. So essentially, I have not worked in the vaccine area. I have not worked in sterile liquids. However, I have gone through the entire process from the phase 2 trials when we start doing our stability studies, all the way to launching, where we file the product, and then also the launch process where we're actually manufacturing for everyone's use. So when I was seeing that the process was taking place so quickly, I was a little surprised. I was like, the quickest vaccine that's ever been developed was the Ebola vaccine. And that took 4 years. And you think, well, 4 years is forever, but that is quite quick to create a vaccine. So when they were talking about having a vaccine within 10 months, I was a little surprised. But then as I learned a little bit more about the process and also the technology was involved, I was reassured. I think the technology is excellent, and they're able to create a vaccine, or at least develop one, within weeks rather than months. And I was really very surprised, but very happy to see that. And then when Arlene was going through the process of, usually we go in stages, we go in steps where we'll go through the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And then when I'm doing my manufacturing, I usually don't do a lot of the manufacturing or the qualification of this manufacturing process until phase 3. So when they were able to compress that timeline from starting at phase 1 and start manufacturing the actual vaccine for human use, I knew that we had something on our hands. I knew that things would go very rapidly, and you can see the process. So I do not have any qualms, any issues with the speed, because I know that we don't take corners. And I think Arlene knows this just as well as I do. We do not take any corners in the pharmaceutical industry. We do not rush things. If we do anything that's ill towards manufacturing good quality, perfectly controlled pharmaceutical products, we're probably not going to be working at that company or working in the industry very long. So we take our jobs very seriously. And I would have no hesitation if someone had the vaccine in their hand right now and they came to my house, I would be happy to have it. And the one thing is too, that's most important. I think when we're looking at the 2 vaccines that are available, Moderna and Pfizer, they're excellent vaccines. They have good efficacy right now, 95%. I think everyone's really excited about that. And I know that there's been recent information about Johnson & Johnson maybe having a little bit less efficacy. The important thing to remember is we don't really have a choice. We need to take what they have available to us right now so we can get shots in our arms, create that herd immunity so we're all going to be safe and be able to live our lives normally. And I think the one important thing to remember is we need as many shots on goal as you were talking about recently. We need as many available to get to as many people as quickly as possible. So I'm happy to yield the floor. I have some information and slides, but maybe that can be sent out to all the people that are online. I think one important thing that I just don't want to forget about is facts matter. So the one thing that I even heard this morning, I talked to my father. He just received his first dose of the Moderna vaccine, and he was talking to some of his friends. And they were like, I'm not going to get it. And I told them, it's like, you got to be able to give them the information, the knowledge they need. So going to reliable websites, looking at the information and not really looking at one news source versus this news source, looking at cdc.gov is important. The New Jersey vaccine site, I think, very informative. If you have a chance to go online there, they take a lot of sources that are well organized and truthful, and they would be able to give you knowledge that you need. And maybe you can get the vaccine, but then also, make sure that your friends understand where to get that information that'll help them decide on when to get the vaccine too. So I think with that, I want to yield back to Ola so she can go ahead and start providing some of the information before we take questions and answers.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for that segue. We are going into some general information about registering for the vaccine and access. It's very important to know that New Jersey has a COVID-19 vaccine call center for those who do not have internet access or not comfortable using technology. So the number is there. The number is there, 855-568-0545. And this information will be shared with participants after. There are 6 state vaccination mega sites. So you do not have to, there's no residency requirement to access those. But you do have to register with the state online on the state vaccination registry system to schedule an appointment at a mega site. County health departments, some county health departments are also offering vaccination sites. One thing, Somerset County does require you to register on the state vaccine registry system to schedule your appointment. Some other counties, they have their own registration. You can access that from their websites, and that information will be shared after this. Also, healthcare facilities, some of them you can schedule your appointments directly with them. They are W.J. Barnabas, Summit Medical Group, Atlantic Health System. The options are available, and you are encouraged to register in multiple places since, as it's been mentioned today, that supply is low. So wherever you can get a vaccine try, but also if you receive a vaccine and you don't need an appointment elsewhere, please cancel so that someone else can move up in the queue. Also, retail pharmacies are also offering, some retail pharmacies are offering vaccines. So ShopRite, has partnered with the state at their pharmacies. CVS is coming online next, well, some of their locations are coming online starting next week, the week of the 11th. For locations that you can register for it, you can start registering on the 9th on their website, on CVS's website or their app. Rite Aid will be coming online. Information is still to be determined. I can share with you that some of the CVS locations that will offer vaccines are in North Plainfield, Greenbrook, Union, Flemington, and Stanhope. So more information as they receive their vaccine doses, then more details will be added. So this information will also be shared with you. And now we turn it to our Q&A session. So if you have questions, please enter your questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, one question we have. Does it matter which vaccine a person gets, advantages or disadvantages?
I'll take a stab at that.
Anyone?
During the pandemic, the goal is to get as many people vaccinated as possible, as soon as possible. So right now, I would say it doesn't matter which one you are getting. Now, down the road, as we have greater supply and as we move more into a commercial phase and the pandemic is over, we're trying to determine what frequency would these have to be given. So like, would you need an annual, similar to the flu shot where you would have to get this annually? Some of the things that will come into play with availability of the vaccines, both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines being RNA vaccines are less stable. So they have to be stored in deep freeze conditions. So not all pharmacies or doctor's offices or facilities will have those deep freeze storage conditions. So that limits, especially for Pfizer, where you can access that vaccine. Moderna's can be stored in a deep freeze, but then they have more data showing refrigerated temperatures for an extended time once it's been transported to a final place where it's going to be where being used in a vaccination. When the J&J vaccine comes out as a viral vectored vaccine, it doesn't have those stability issues. So we have data going out for 3 months at refrigerated temperatures, and other viral vectored vaccines that we have made are stable at refrigerated temperatures for 2 years. So we are doing ongoing stability studies to show how long it will last at a refrigerated temperature. I will say that for all the vaccines, they do not contain preservatives. So in the past, there's always been questions about, PEG, polyethylene glycol, other preservatives that could be in the vaccine. None of these have a preservative, but because of that, once the vial has been punctured, you have to use the contents of the vial within 6 hours. So that's why most of these are multi-dose vials. The J&J one will be 5 doses in one vial. So when you're doing max vaccinations, it's not a problem. But if you're in a doctor's office, you may not have a line of people waiting for a vaccine. And if you can't use all of those doses within 6 hours, you have to throw the rest out. So that's a downside of not having a preservative. So, but otherwise, right now, get vaccinated with whatever is available in your area. And again, the goal, get as many people vaccinated as quickly as possible, because that will eradicate the virus and also prevent the spread of these variants that are out there.
Thank you, Arlene. Any other questions? Type in the chat, unmute yourself.
Ola, I have a question because I'm just asked this question a lot by individuals that are concerned about getting the vaccine, if they have an ongoing health issue, if they are currently being treated for cancer. So I just want to touch on that a little bit. I was also hesitant when I received my vaccine. I am currently actively, I have Lyme's disease. And I've gone through different courses of prednisone. So I just wanted to speak to that. The National Cancer Institute just said that it's still so important, even if you have most types of cancer, you should still get the vaccine, as well as I was, battling Lyme's disease and had a prior dose of a course of prednisone, and they still allowed me to get the vaccine. So hopefully that'll help some people who are hesitant, who are going through some different health conditions.
And just to add to Colleen's statement there, the recommendation is to go ahead and get vaccinated. Just know that you may not have as an effective response as a normal person with a normal immune system. So you still need to, even once you're vaccinated, you still need to take the precautions of wearing a mask, social distancing, washing your hands, because if you're exposed, you may not be able to completely fight it off. You would get a milder case, but you still want to protect yourself and others, even after vaccination.
Also, just to add to that, we talked about this a little bit, but like Colleen said, everyone's recommended to get the vaccine regardless of most conditions. The only one that we feel is a disqualifier is if you have had a severe reaction to other vaccines, such as an anaphylactic attack after a vaccine. It's rare. And if you have a history of that, you definitely want to tell your provider that you have that. They would probably not give you the vaccine if that's happened to you. But also, as Colleen had said, they have Epipens right there, just in case anyone did have an anaphylactic reaction. They have Epipens there. But it's rare, but if you have that in your history, you'll want to tell your provider that.
Any additional questions or comments for our panelists, or any additional comments from our panelists for all of us to take with us? Okay. Thank you so very much to our panelists, Arlene Price, Heather Christian, Colleen Becker, and Brad Hansen. Thank you so very much. And finally, thank you to all of our attendees, and thank you for your questions and your attention. The presenters' slides and additional resources will be shared with all participants after, and this will be shared on SHLC's YouTube page and website after. So now we turn to Pastor Trinkline for our closing prayer.
All right. This one actually gets on the recording, so I'll look forward to this prayer. But I want to say thank you to you who are sharing out of your area of expertise. I know for me, you've given me confidence and comfort. I know you have to others. And, isn't it a marvelous miracle to see how quickly this has come about with the vaccines? And but in all things, we still have to be wise, like you said, and we just have a trust in our Lord, who is, always with us. And we continue to pray for our neighbors, our friends, everybody. So let's close with prayer. Father, thank you so much for those who have shared with us today and for the information we have received and how important it is to get the actual facts and the truth and be able to make wise decisions. So I pray for all those who have heard this today, those who will hear it in the future, via our recording being posted. Lord, just work in each and every person's life, that in all things they trust you, but also that they make available to themselves the wonderful gifts that come to us by way of medicine, by way of those who service in the medical field and those in the research field. And so I ask your blessings upon our panelists for giving of their time to us. So Lord, we commend ourselves into your hands, fully confident that you are with us, our God, our rock, and our Redeemer. And it is in Jesus' name that I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you
Amen.
so
Thank
much.
you, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. Enjoy your weekend. Stay warm. We're getting snow.
Thank you, Ola, for organizing this. Well done.
Thank
Very
you.
well.
Thank you all. Have a
Yeah,
nice
thank you, Pastor.
weekend.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Be safe.
Bye-bye,
Stay
everyone.
away from the snow.
And go Chiefs.
Don't go picking up everything in the grocery store. Go Chief, Colleen, huh? All righty, go Chief. We'll see.
So, Ola,